Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Alan Herrera. I am AFPC-USA's leader of editorial operations. And this is another episode of our Foreign Correspondents Talk series 2024, wherein in my capacity, I interview foreign correspondents about their lives and their experiences, and we just get an opportunity to get to know them a little better. It is a wonderful privilege for me. I very much enjoy it. And today I have another cool and interesting person on here. I have the wonderful Turkish journalist Rabia Iclal Turan, who she's worked in Istanbul, she's worked in London. These days, she is based in Washington, D.C., and I will give the floor to her. So thank you, Rabia. It's wonderful to have you here with me today.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having me, and thank you for doing this. So, yeah, as you introduced me, I am a journalist from Turkey. I have been a journalist for 13 years, starting as an intern reporter at a newspaper in Istanbul. From there, I worked as an editor and producer for some of Turkey's leading broadcast networks such as Habertürk and Channel 24. And after 5 years in journalism, I decided to pursue masters in journalism and, gain an international perspective, which actually led me to move to London. You mentioned. In London, I studied interactive and digital journalism at City University of London, which broadened my, international perspective and enhanced my journalistic skills. After completing my studies, I moved back to Turkey with, an aspiration of pursuing international journalism, and I wanted to produce stories in English. And in Turkey, there are a few outlets publishing in English, with maintain international offices with the opportunities for overseas postings, and Anadolu Agency is one of them. And I joined Anadolu Agency's English language service and have been with them for the past 6 years. I started in Ankara, where I was based for 3 years, and from there I moved back to Istanbul, where I was born and raised and spent most of my time life. During my time with Anadolu, I had the opportunity to travel extensively across Turkey and the region, covering politics, the society, and many international news, international events. After 4 years with Anadolu, I was offered the position of Washington correspondent. And I decided that, I was hesitant at first because, Washington, it's far, far away from Turkey. I would actually maybe prefer to be posted in somewhere that is more close to my home country. But I ultimately decided that it would be a valuable experience, and I accepted the offer, and I have now based in Washington, D.C. for the past 2 years.
Wow, so you've had a crazy journey. I mean, your resume is obviously very it's very extensive. It's fascinating. And I mean, you're right. You are so far from home. I will preface this by saying that I love Turkey. I went a couple of years ago. It was magical. I had an amazing time. The nicest people and the food. So, yeah,
Yeah, it is. Have you been to Istanbul?
I
Or
have. I
Mhm.
have been to Istanbul. I have been to Denizli and like Pamukkale, and
Oh, mhm.
I have been to Izmir as well.
Mm.
Yes. So I loved it. I love the Turkish people, and I especially love. And believe me, so many stories I could tell. But I have genuinely, have a lot of affection for the country. And you are not the first Turkish journalist who, of course, who I've met and interviewed, but I just feel the need to say that. In part
Thank
because,
you.
yes, and in part because you are you are far from home, but would you mind telling me, like, so what was your experience then, just getting acclimated, right? Like assimilating into DC. Like, have you grown, was it difficult to get accustomed to living in DC?
So actually, so there were both challenges, but they were easiest parts too. The easiest part for me actually was finding an apartment and settling down. I was quite lucky compared to other colleagues because one of my colleagues was leaving DC at the time, and I was able to secure a fully furnished apartment that was ready to move into, which is a huge plus. But there are also challenges. Building relationships was initially challenging, but I adapted quickly thanks to my previous experience living abroad and covering, other countries. The more challenging aspect for me was, and has been uh, adjusting to the pace of Washington, D.C., and I'm still working on it. Back in Turkey, I used to think that there was no place in the world as dynamic where you could cover literally multiple breaking and unpredictable stories in a single day. Like now, I have come to realize that Washington is no less hectic than Turkey when it comes to busy news agenda, and I still struggle with managing the constant flow of information here. I receive dozens of tens of emails, WhatsApp notifications every day, not to even I'm not even mentioning the Twitter alerts from the president, secretary, spokesperson, congress members, journalists. Their Twitter alerts are always open so that I can be the first Turkish journalist to report on these major breaking stories for the Turkish audience. So it's a really relentless stream and can be overwhelming sometimes, but in the end, I don't want to complain a lot because in the end, I mean, at the end of the day, I feel good because each experience teaches me something valuable, and I think it helps me in my professional journey. And literally learned a lot from all these experiences.
Throughout this journey, of course, the great thing about journalism, right? The great thing about being in this field, and certainly this has been the case in my experience, has just been the opportunity to, again, to speak to so many interesting people. People don't realize, right? They don't realize that they themselves are interesting. Everybody has a story, everybody has a story. And would you mind telling me perhaps, like what is your favorite story that you've worked on, or one of them, right? Because there's so many stories. What is the favorite story that you've worked on in your career, whether it's back home in Turkey or perhaps something that you've uncovered here in Washington, D.C.?
It's difficult for me to choose like one specific story. There are many. I mean, I always, for me, it's really important to do interviews with high level officials. I did a lot of interviews back in Turkey, interviews with foreign ministers of various of countries visiting Turkey, from Ukraine to Azerbaijan, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, Luxembourg. I would say these were very significant, and here I had the chance to interview many senior U.S. officials, Deputy State Department spokesperson, Assistant Secretary of State, and these were significant. But I think over the past year, when looking at the past year, the most significant stories I have covered were related to the U.S. foreign policy towards the Israel-Palestine conflict, reporting on America's role, its arms transfers, and the diplomatic language used has been eye-opening for me. And the stories and also the questions I raised at the daily press briefings. I regularly attend daily press briefings at the State Department. And the work I have done there, I observed that resonated deeply in Turkey and the wider region. And as a journalist, it was satisfying to see that my work had an impact. This is what motivates me. While I'm not sure if it changed anything, but I believe that, as journalists, we are also documenting history. So I want to believe that maybe the history is written, perhaps one of these stories, or maybe the questions I raised at the briefings will be a part of it. And this possibility is what motivates me to continue my work. And despite the challenges that I just mentioned, the occasional exhaustion, being subjected to continuous flow of information. Despite all these challenges, this possibility motivates me to continue my work.
That's I always find that very fascinating because journalism is, of course, it's not just a job. I mean, I view it as it's certainly a calling. You need to have I believe, a certain temperament, a certain curiosity, right? Certainly about the world around you, to say nothing of current events in general, right? In order to succeed. And you also have to be a very good listener, right? You have to be willing to listen and to share with people and meet them, where they are, in order to report on their stories accurately and fairly, sensitively, compassionately. These are all things that really resonate with me, Rabia. So, I mean, I'm curious, when did you realize, perhaps when you were a child, I don't know, like when did you realize I want to be a journalist or I want to tell stories? Was there something that clicked with you when you were younger, or was it a bit more of an unorthodox journey where you sort of fell into journalism a little later on?
Uh, it's both actually. So actually, yeah, when I was a child going to the primary school, I had the dream of becoming a journalist, and it was mainly because my teacher back then, uh, I had a homework. It was I was given like for 3 months to do that. And my teacher that back then told me to do some research on, how a newspaper is published and delivered. So she wanted me to do some research on this process. And I went to a newspaper in Istanbul back then to observe this process, how they produce the stories, then how the newspaper is published and delivered to the audience. So after observing this process, I I was impressed and I wanted to become a journalist. But I was a child, so I after a while I changed my mind, and I wanted to be a psychologist, then I wanted to become a doctor, a lot of things. But after high school, completing high school, I was, I again changed my mind to become a journalist and pursued this goal. And now I'm here and making realize my dreams.
Do you ever, I'm curious, when did you realize perhaps that was there ever a moment, I guess, let me put it this way. Was there ever a moment where you perhaps doubted your career path? Because like for instance, I had a conversation with more than one journalist actually, right? And they're brilliant, obviously. They're brilliant in their own right, and they've been featured on our series, right? But they discussed and we commiserated over the topic of imposter syndrome. Like when you start, right, when you start working, you're surrounded by brilliant, successful people. And of course, you have so many opportunities, right, to engage with them and to learn more, to be educated. You become a stronger, resilient, just a better reporter, as a result. But there can also be that doubt of like, do I belong here? Like, Like, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like,
I know what you mean, and I think I had a kind of a similar feeling when I was an intern reporter at a newspaper in Istanbul. Of course, I was surrounded by very successful and seasoned journalists and reporters. But actually, so the people I met there, they all love what they are doing. They love journalism, but they also mentioned about the challenges of journalism, and they were like, you are too young, and maybe you should think twice because being a journalist is not an easy job. It's exhausting, and you should think again, maybe. So I at first, like, seeing those challenges, observing the challenges they face, I doubt maybe I shouldn't be going into journalism, maybe doing something else. But after continuing the profession and having the experience, I just loved it. And I think it's the thing about journalism. Even though you face challenges, if you have this passion for journalism, like, telling the stories and covering the stories, if you have this passion, this is what keeps you in the job. And uh, I just love doing it, and this is why I have been doing this for 13 years, despite all the challenges.
and the time flies. That's the thing.
Yes, yes.
Yes, before you know it, you've been in the field for 13 years and you've covered so many, so many interesting stories. Um, I guess one thing that comes to mind here is, of course, you've been charting this, you've been sharing with me, sharing with our audience today, so much about just the progress that you've made over the course of your career. And, you are, as we've established, you're far from home. So could you share with me, what was your impression of the United States, perhaps, and Americans, in general, perhaps, before, when you were in Turkey, and then what was it like when you came to the US? Like, how have you grown and evolved and gained perhaps a deeper understanding of just living in the United States and perhaps reporting in the United States?
So it's a vast and diverse country. While I haven't traveled extensively yet, but I lived in the US before, when I was a student. I came here to study English for a while. I lived in New York. I haven't traveled extensively, but I visited several states and plan to explore more in the coming year when I have time. I would say each state feels like it feels like a different country. I am based in Washington, D.C., spending most of my time here. I often travel to New York, your city, uh, especially when I'm longing for the energy of Istanbul. You will understand me because you are from New York and you saw Istanbul too. I mean, I think you will agree with me that New York reminds me of Istanbul, vibrant, lively, a city that never sleeps. So on the contrary, Washington, it's quite dynamic, energetic, fast-paced during the day. But it might get quite boring after dark. You agree with me? So
No, I'm
most
yes.
most people had go to home to their families. The streets become empty, and shops close quite early. Uh, so New York is more like Istanbul. This is why I often travel to New York. But what I appreciate here in Washington, most I appreciate the most is multiculturalism. You can meet people from all around the world, including from countries actually I have never heard of, or I couldn't locate on the map. I literally met people from countries that I cannot locate on the map. So and many of the people I have met here are high-level professionals, like diplomats, academics, and journalists, and I have learned a lot from them. And it's also an excellent networking opportunity, especially for a journalist, for an international journalist. As a journalist covering, these connections are invaluable for me. For instance, if I need to cover a story related to one of those countries, I can always reach out to those people I met here and I can ask for their assistance and their insights. So this is important. Being here during the elections has been a great opportunity. I have learned a lot, literally a lot about Americans and their political system. It is, I'm sure you will agree with me, everyone agrees on this, that the society is quite polarized. Uh, but this is something I am familiar with from Turkey. It's been interesting to observe both the similarities and the differences between the two countries, the United States and my home country.
Yes, I mean your point about uh it being polarized. I mean, it is a very true thing. And sadly, I mean, of course, we could be here all day, right, discussing the different factors that have contributed to this political polarization and that of course, there have been similar impacts, right, in other countries worldwide, and we're seeing all of this play out. And yet, speaking, of course, as a born and raised American, as a born and raised New Yorker in particular, which, yes, we are a 24-hour city, and it's wonderful. We're so spoiled for choice; it's fantastic. But the thing is, I've never known anything that wasn't, multicultural, right? Multicultural and vibrant. And because of all of that exposure from the time I was a child, right? Like I had, Bengali classmates and I had Turkish classmates and I had Russian class, like you name it, right? Like whatever country around the world, right? I've been exposed to. And one thing that I realized from a very young age is that this country, despite all of its issues, is full of fascinating, exceedingly kind people, many of whom, if you just take a minute or two to just listen to them, right? You get incredible insights and incredible stories. And that to me is certainly what makes it so exciting to, again, to be in this field and to be a journalist. So, um, I suppose to spin off on that, right? What is perhaps the greatest and most valuable skill that you've developed, right, as a journalist over the course of your career?
I mean, over the course of my career, not just in the United States, right?
I mean, over the course of your career, and you can get into the United States. Like, are there things, for example, that you've learned, even more about yourself and your abilities now that you're in the US?
Yeah, I mean, I think thing that the thing about journalism that, it teaches me a lot, it's engaging with people from a variety of backgrounds, different backgrounds. And it was the case when I was in Turkey, and also it was the case when I was covering the older region. Uh, it's since I have been working in the US, it says the experience I've had here has also a positive perspective in my career. It's been, informative and educational. Uh, I deeply appreciate the level of access provided to foreign journalists in Washington. I you know, whenever I attend the daily press briefings, foreign journalists are like me are regularly called on, and I have been able to ask multiple follow-up questions, which, you know, allows for deeper engagement, and you know, it helps me to learn more about the US foreign policy. These experiences have all significantly deepened my understanding of the politics and foreign policy and how the, you know, things work. It's journalism is also about network. You know, your sources are everything. So and cities, like especially like capital cities. It was like when I was in Turkey, I lived in Ankara, the capital city of Turkey. It was the case when I was in Ankara too, and it's the case in Washington too. These cities are like excellent place for building a professional network. So connecting with journalists and diplomats and academics from diverse backgrounds is an important asset for all journalists, and this really helped me in my professional journey. You know, these engagements and all in all of these engagements, you learn something from these people, and it contributes to your knowledge. It enhances your knowledge and broadens your horizon, and it helps you in your professional journey, makes you more of a professional journalist.
With that said, and thank you so much, you know, for being here with me today,
Of
Rabia.
course. Thank you
Yes,
for having me.
yes, it's been wonderful. I just want to close out with I suppose one more question. Uh, what would you say to an aspiring journalist who, you know, who wants to work in the United States or some other country? Can you share like what do they need in order to thrive in this business and to pursue their passion?
Well, I think so. I mean, it's even though, you know, I am an experienced journalist, it's a journey and I'm still learning. I don't feel like, you know, I am done and I finished and, you know, I can just lecture anyone about journalism. So I am still on this path. But I would say to foreign journalists planning to come to the, you know, aspiring foreign journalists planning to come to the US or to travel to other countries, it's actually, I think, essential to understand the country history, politics, and culture of the country they want to cover. I would recommend them. I also try to do that. You know, take some time to research, read about the country, the history, visit maybe museums, attend events, and, you know, and most importantly, engage with people from diverse backgrounds, because I think reflecting these different perspectives in your stories is important to balance reporting. Uh, I would recommend them to make an effort to engage with people, you know, holding people from different political views. And this is an advice I also share with foreign journalists covering my home country, Turkey, because I mean many of them tend to stay just in Istanbul and interact with the same circles, and this sometimes, or maybe most of the times, you know, can result in one-sided coverage. So I try to avoid this in my work here, and would recommend other aspiring foreign journalists to do the same. And also, of course, as I also mentioned, networking is everything in journalism, and I would recommend them to build a strong network and build, you know, sources, make them trust you. this will help a lot in your coverage, because I mean these relationships are literally important in journalism.
I think that you are so, so right. And I hope that whoever is watching us and listening to us today really takes this to heart. I think that you provide some wonderful insights that are very valuable. And I just want to say, Rabia, that it has been a complete pleasure, totally my pleasure to have you
My
on.
pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. Thank you. And, I look forward to perhaps collaborating with you next time.